Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Social Z Franchise Happy Hour. I'm the host, Calvin Smith, as usual, coming from a relatively chilly Destin, Florida at 70 degrees, which for us is cold weather. I was just telling Luis it's too cold to get in the water right now, but all the Northerners and Canadians and people on vacation are still swimming. But real excited to have our guest, Charles, coming from beautiful Charleston, South Carolina. Charles, we're so glad to have you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So to kick us off, what we ask you to do is take 60 to 120 seconds. Give us whatever your quick background is, so we can understand who you are, and then if you could wrap that up with whatever you're reading or listening to as far as personal development goes right now.
Cool. Yeah, man. So I am a habitual franchisee. I've owned a few franchises. Massage Envy kind of being my latest one. I've also owned Yoga 6, and I also owned a company called Boost Mobile. Some people may be familiar with that, the Where You At commercials, where we used to walkie-talkie to each other back in the day. They didn't have the franchise model then. They didn't really do the fees and protect the territories, but they had the license model, so very similar to the franchising, and had 20 of those locations, and we sold those in 2015. And then and that got into Massage Envy, Yoga 6, and currently exploring another opportunity with K9 Pet Resorts, a pet franchise. So, to kind of fill my time during the week, I help other people find franchise opportunities, and I take a little bit different of an approach. Some people are cheerleaders to kind of help people overcome their fear and anxiety of purchasing franchising and owning their business. I take a more educated approach and try to educate people what it takes to run a successful franchise. So that's kind of what I do on a weekly basis to try to stay busy with the kids and the wife. I've never really dived into the personal development stuff. I usually pick up those books and they fall on my bedside table pretty quickly. I'm I'm an avid listener of music. I believe in just the get it done attitude. Every time I read a book, at the end of the day, people ask me to summarize it, and I'm like, well, I think you just got to do it, And
Sure.
So that's just kind of been my philosophy is, be a people person, be good to the world. It'll be good back, and build a strong culture. If you're building a business, be good to the people who are building your business, and I don't try to over complicate things. So
Sure.
Yeah.
Thanks, Charles. Very cool. So looking at your LinkedIn profile, obviously great work history there, and a lot of different businesses that you own that you ran through. One of the things I wanted to get some clarity on from you is, a lot of people call themselves a franchise consultant, but I think your title, and which sounds really cool, is a franchise friend, right? So tell us about what, you said you could take a different approach. What is a franchise friend, and what does that mean to be different versus people, that might call themselves a franchise consultant?
Yeah, franchise consultant, I think over the years has kind of developed a little bit of a reputation. Franchise advisor, I think depending on the week and the month and the new LinkedIn title that week, people have called themselves all types of stuff. And again, my approach with people is, very straightforward. I want to run a very trustworthy business whenever I'm doing consulting. One thing that I'd always ask people, even when I was with Boost Mobile, if you were to tell your friends and family to get a phone, what phone would you refer to them? And they'd be like, I'd tell them to get Boost Mobile because it's $50 a month, And so it's kind of the same thing where I'm like, if I was your friend, what business would you tell me to buy? What would a friend tell me to buy? And so those are the businesses I tell people to look at. And they're not the Chick-fil-A's of the world. I think people get disappointed in that. But they are typically the more unsexy businesses that you're familiar with, with the painting and the fencing and stuff like that. And, sometimes people want the spas and the fitness of the world, and those are great businesses too. But, if you're going to ask a friend, they may not point you in that direction. So
Sure. Yeah, that's a great approach. Absolutely. And I think most people, if they're smart, they're going to talk to their friends about, an opportunity before they would trust a consultant, right? So I like the franchise friend piece. Absolutely.
They don't know me from anyone else, and, most time people are, in the Google verse and they land on me or any other franchise consultant, you just met a guy you've known for, an hour and a half, and you're going to spend a couple $100,000 on a business.
Right.
So I kind of understand that perspective and understand that these are life-changing decisions that are being made. So I just, so that's my approach is, I just want to make sure that people go into this with the eyes wide open.
Absolutely. And Charles, definitely want to learn more about your businesses and everything that you're doing now. But before we dive into that, let's talk a little bit about, how you got here. So where did you grow up? I know you went to university in North Carolina. Are you from that area? Where did you grow up, and what was your earliest kind of memory, or when is your earliest time where you're like, hey, I'm going to be a business owner?
I wish I had a fairy tale story like a lot of other people do. I probably should just come up with one. But I went to UNCW, University of North Carolina, Wilmington. Went to film school because I didn't know what else I was going to do. And quickly learned that you're not going to make any money making films, and so I moved to Raleigh with my now wife, and I worked for a Sprint store and selling cell phones, and then somehow that got transitioned into distributing, or the distribution side of cell phones and helping people open up their own cell phone stores, which kind of led me to that 2008 era of, when the economy was kind of going down, people were kind of stuck in 2-year contracts, and, nobody wanted to pay all this money for phones and contracts. And, so prepaid, kind of the merging of prepaid came at that time. Is kind of, not non-existent at this point, or not like it used to be, but it was really, that first idea of entrepreneurship, I was always kind of pre-programmed, like the W-2 mindset, and, even me going to school for film was like pre-programmed. My dad's like, you got to go to school. I don't care if it's basket weaving, like go to school, so that's what I did. I was just like fell in line, like a lot of other people do. And then, I was starting to see success for the people that I was like helping getting into the cell phone world. And, I was like, wow, this isn't that hard, and like I'm teaching these people how to do it. And like, why can't I do it? So a buddy of mine from college, I just called him up. I was like, hey, you want to make a couple $1,000s a month? And he was like, yeah, sure. Let's do it. So we opened up a location up in the mountains of Virginia. That was our first Boost Mobile store. And it ended up being the number one store for like 3 years in a row in the nation.
Wow.
And it was like 600 square feet. Like the landlord had an office in the back room. It was like $800 a month, and it included electricity or something. And it was like, we did a couple $1 million and sell it every year. It's crazy.
That is awesome. Yeah.
So yeah, man. So that was my story to kind of get started. And we just kind of snowballed, realized that we kind of, had something going, and so we just kept growing and until we saw the writing on the wall to kind of move on. So yeah.
So you mentioned you ended with around 20 stores or so, I think you said, before you had your exit. So talk to that. How do you go through from one 600 square foot store to 20? Like, what's that evolution look like? And you did it pretty quick. I mean, you did all that within less than 5 years, right?
Yeah. It was pretty quick. I've gotten this question a lot, even whenever I'm doing my franchise friend work, and I really do mean this honestly. When we were opening, like we were thinking, like, how can we separate ourselves from the day to day business, and I don't have to worry about somebody calling out sick and me having to go to the store. And we really never had that problem. We had really good employees with Boost Mobile, but we wanted to grow the careers of the people that work for us.
Sure.
And there was only one way to do that, with retail businesses, like you kind of, you see people who are stuck, in some of these retail businesses. Like there's a reason why there's turnover in these businesses, because they don't grow. They're kind of stuck at, this one location or two locations. And we had really good people that worked for us who, who shared our vision, who grew with us,
Sure.
We opened our first store with these people, or second store, and our third store with these people, and they knew our vision. They could replicate it. They knew our recipe. And so we were like, if we can just continue to do this, we didn't need that much money to live. And, I didn't have kids or anything. So we just kept reinvesting the money back in the business, and growing more locations and creating more opportunities for the people that work for us. And that's how you keep people around, is just create opportunities for them so they aren't bored and stagnant.
Right.
And so I think that's what motivated our growth the most, was the, just giving people the ability to grow, outside of ourselves. So. Sure.
And then you mentioned once you had your exit there from the Boost stores, Charles, and then you landed at Massage Envy. Like, what was that process like? And I mean, did you work with a consultant or advisor to land there? And how did you end up on Massage Envy?
Yeah, so a buddy of mine works. He was working at a accounting firm at the time. It was called Ceteris, and they did automated bookkeeping for a bunch of franchise systems. And so their whole idea is to, all these franchises buy their goods from one place, and they use all the same POS systems, so they can automate these books fairly quickly. And so they had a good portfolio of brands, and so it was really a question on the golf course of, hey, what are your most successful franchises? Who better to ask than the accountant themselves? And so I think number one was Orange Theory, and number two was Massage Envy at the time. And so I was like, great, let's look at some Massage Envies, and so kind of got a distress sell out of Virginia. It was a current Z, had kind of packed his bags, moved to Puerto Rico, kind of gave up on the business to some degree.
Sure.
And so we were able to snag some, and we grew our system to 7, mostly by acquisition. But yeah, and when we sold that last year to private equity in our exit. So
awesome. And then from there, I guess while you were still growing that, you moved into the Yoga 6. So what was the thought process there? And I mean, it seems like you're on a good trend. You mentioned the pet franchise you're looking at now is, I mean, is this kind of your passion now, is to find these brands, grow multi locations, and then have an exit? Is that where you're at?
Yeah, I think I get that question a lot too. Do you want to build it and sell it? Is that what your plan is? And it's hard to say. Like, you don't really know what your plan is. And then something happens, and then you're like, this is a good time to exit. But with Yoga 6, we kind of saw the writing on the wall with Massage Envy. Massage Envy was kind of in a trajectory of rolling up their locations to private equity. So it was either acquire or be acquired. That was going to be their thing. And so we kind of were like, okay, if we're going to go out and acquire, then we're going to be bidding up against private equity firms who have endless pockets. So we don't want to get in the bidding wars whenever you kind of buy franchises. And they didn't really have more room for development. Massage Envy had 1,200 locations across the nation.
Sure.
So we kind of felt like, hey, we're going to need to branch outside and open up a different brand. And so we were really impressed with Exponential Fitness, who is the parent company of Yoga 6. That we kind of liked their vision. But it was also like a group of Massage Envy guys that, we kind of really all got along and enjoyed each other's company and just kind of wanted to be a part of like the next thing.
Sure.
And so we bought 6 licenses up in Raleigh, North Carolina, and we're about to start development, and then COVID hit us in the mouth, and
Sure.
nobody was doing hot yoga in COVID. So
Yeah.
the Exponential team reached out, like kind of right in the middle of COVID. They're just asking, "Hey, you guys going to develop these, or are we going to sell them?" And so they had a couple buyers. I mean, like Exponential, hot brands, and so they just they had a couple buyers lined up for Raleigh. We kind of were uncertain with COVID at the time, and so we felt like it'd be best to move off of it, and maybe we can find our next thing. So the Yoga
Sure.
6 was a dream that never really came true.
Sure.
Yeah.
So it's still a good experience, right? So with your different ventures and everything so far, Charles, what do you feel like has been the biggest I don't want to say mistake, but the thing that you've learned from the most, right? What was something you look back on, you're over a decade now, and then, as an entrepreneur, where you're like, man, if I would have known that 10, 11 years ago, I'd have a different life now. Like, what are some of those things?
Yeah, there's probably a lot of things, and there's probably nothing. A lot of people are going to say, you got to learn from your mistakes. But I'm very grateful for the decisions I've made and all the mistakes that I've made. So, I think if there's one thing that sticks out the most is just be careful who you partner with. I think business partners are an extremely delicate relationship. You become closer to these people than you do your own family.
Sure.
And so just be, and it's not that I've had bad experiences, or I've just had unique experiences with business partners that I feel like if things would have been different, things could have been different if if we would have done things one way or the other, and so I think developing your lanes, you don't have multiple operation people. Like there's some people that, if you partner with one person, then like they have a way that they want to do things. You have a way that you want to do things. Like you really need an operation mindset person, and then somebody who's the doer, and,
right.
But, I think there's just, there's certain things that you need to look for that complement yourself, whenever you're looking for business partners. And I think business partners are a really good way to grow because it allows you to not shoulder the business by yourself, and you're able to take vacations. You're able to cut your phone off,
Right.
And I think that stuff's invaluable. I can't say I've had really hard lessons, but
Sure.
I do think that there's been some things that I could look back on and say I could have been better about even nurturing my relationships with my business partners.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to dive more into the franchise, friend part of your portfolio here. But before we do that, you mentioned you were looking at a new opportunity in sort of the pet care space, and tell us a little bit about that, and why are you excited about it?
Yeah, so recently, my whole idea with getting into consulting originally was, I'm going to have a sneak peek behind the curtains of all the cool
Sure.
franchise brands, and I'm going to get to pick the next one I'm going to find, right, and open. But, I kind of kept really busy with doing consulting and never really had a chance to kind of dive into any of these brands. I really like a lot of the brands that we work with, but they're, with the pet resort, it's Canine Pet Resort, there was something that kind of stuck out, like it was unique in its offering. It wasn't, like they were just high end. They kind of filled a void in the pet care space, only because I board my dog. I've never really even thought about like what type of place I'm boarding my dog. Like it's, are they allowed to play? And, but every time I walked in, it stunk really bad. And the people were angry.
Sure.
And, and so like it was just like this high end, pet resort, and and I was like, wow, this is kind of missing in this space. And people love to spend money on their dogs, and it doesn't really matter what the price is. Like who cares if you're $10 more? Like I walk in, I don't even smell dogs, and so it was a unique opportunity. There's a lot of high profile investors that were in this space, and so it got me really excited. The guys have really thought through a lot of things that I wouldn't have thought about, which is something that I like to see whenever I'm looking at franchises. Like, what am I getting for this franchise fee? If it's a painting company, like why do I need a franchise for it, right? And so what are the things that you've done that are going to be shortcuts for me, that are going to save me money? That this franchise fee, and like they had like collapsible dog pens that created more play space and then created more overnight stays, and they had pre-mix cleaning that saved like $30,000 a year, and they had all these awards and accolades. They had really good branding, really good support team. As I'm doing some franchise friend work and I'm telling people to look at franchises, I'm like, you're not going to really know until you get to Discovery Day. Just like you said, like you went to 8 Discovery Days or something, right?
Yeah.
And then you knew afterwards, yes or no, but you probably didn't know yes or no until after, And so you're either impressed with their team or you're not. You're either impressed with what their offerings are or you're not, and you really can't get that feeling until you're there. And I got that feeling when I was there, it was more of a thing that like, hey, this seems like fun and interesting. And then we got there and it was like, these people know what's going on, and you can really feel it. So got really excited about that. And we're hoping, nothing's been signed and dotted yet, but we're hoping to open up a couple in Virginia. So
awesome. Well, great. Well, let's take some time here and let's talk about your franchise friend operation and what you're doing there. And I understand you're partnered with FranChoice, right? Is that?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yep. So tell us a little bit about that. When you mentioned, part of the reason to getting into this space was to kind of get a peek behind the curtain, and obviously you've got a passion for it, with your career. But what's the transition like been going to this side of the business? And do you ever get the itch and or obviously you are with the pet thing, but like how hard is it to stay on that side and not just go buy all these opportunities when you see them when you're introduced them to the pets?
Yeah, it was hard at the beginning for sure. I'm like, man, I really I saw like a pressure washing company. I'm like, pressure washing, yes, that looks good. That looks good. And everything looked good at the beginning. Then you ultimately realize like I can't buy it. I'll buy it all. And then just. I get this question a lot from a lot of the people I help. Like, why aren't you just buying all these opportunities? And and at the end of the day, and to kind of go back to the franchise friend thing, is like a lot of these brands will sell you this idea of being semi-absentee, or being some absentee owner, like throw money in and it'll run itself, and even some consultants do that. Like, hey, here's an opportunity for you to, put money in and not work 10 hours a week.
Yeah.
And it's just not true, and you could probably speak to that, like how much work it takes if you want to be successful, and especially in these service brands, like that you own. I always tell people who are looking at these service brands, like, you got to be the brand,
Yeah.
Like, you are Superior Fence and Rail, you are Serpro. It's not just the badge that you wear from 9 to 5. It's the badge that you go to bed in, you have to live it. You have to breathe it. You have to believe in it, and if you want to be successful, then this is what you have to do. It's not 10 hours a week. And
sure.
And I have a buddy here that owns Pro Lift Garage. and like he grew a mustache. He's on all the television commercials. He's on the billboards. He wears the ProLift hat, wears the ProLift shirt. Yeah. We go to the gym together. He works out in the ProLift gear. Yeah. He is ProLift, like if you think about ProLift, you don't think about this national brand. You think about Travis at the gym,
Right.
And so that's what it takes to be a successful franchise owner, in my mind, especially in the service space. And not everybody's going to tell you that, but and I've probably lost a lot of money by telling people that. But it's true, and I can sleep at night. And that's why I'm a franchise friend. So
yeah, that's great. That's great. You mentioned something earlier in the conversation where you meant because you are looking at what really is an opportunity and not just what may be sexy at the moment. You tend to maybe steer people towards brands that maybe they don't come in with the idea of, or that a lot of other people aren't talking about, right? Like trade services is one that I think you mentioned. Like, why do you? I mean, with your exposure, why do you think certain brands are better opportunities versus others? Like, what is it as the franchise friend? What is it that you're looking for in a brand that gets you excited and for your clients versus something, everyone wants Chick-fil-A. Like you could sell Chick-fil-A in your sleep, I would imagine, right? But it's not right for everybody. So, what are the things about franchisors or brands that get you excited to talk, work with your clients?
Sure. Yeah. I think there's certain brands that like are different, where people are like, okay, I haven't heard of that. And like, so I think like some people are like, come closer to the computer whenever they hear about something that they haven't heard about before, but, but it also is client specific, like some people may have a vision of opening up, 10 yoga studios, or somebody might have a vision of, I do want to work 20 hours a week in my yoga studio, and
sure.
So, and those are two different type of people, right? Right now, in our space, like parking lot striping is starting to get big. There's stripes all over the ground,
Yeah.
And, you never really, I tell people, I'm like, look down, like seriously, like walk outside and like look at all the lines that are around you. You wouldn't ever think about it, but, right. Most of them really need to be repainted. And so there's a lot of opportunity around you. So there's, different strokes for different folks. So really it's about understanding what the candidates, what it is that they need, what is it they want to do, what are they trying to accomplish, how much money are they looking to invest? Like all those things are important, and it's hard to pry that out of people without them thinking that you're trying to sell them something, but all those things are important whenever you start looking at franchise brands because it could be the difference between parking lot striping or opening a boxing studio or something.
Sure.
And, all these brands, are good in their own right. But it could be the difference between 15% margins and 40% margins. Is it more important for them to start pulling cash out right away, or are they looking to build something over time and sell it for multiple? Because at that point, something in the fitness or spa space might make more sense. It's harder to sell your parking lot striping business than it is your sexy, massage spa.
Absolutely.
So it really just depends, candidate specific, and most candidates don't know, and they just really don't know, and that's why you have to kind of go into a process of researching franchises with an open mind. Open heart, and just kind of be willing to consume and educate yourself, and then really kind of decide as things are presented to you. So,
sure, Charles, for your process and where you're able to add value. Where does someone who's thinking about buying a franchise need to be? Do they need to have the money in their pocket and have already given their notice at their career, or is it something where they could be a year out? Like where do you like your clients to come to you at where you can be, the best, partner for them?
Yeah. Really anything and everything, but timing is important for people in some fashions, like it's going to be, hey, I'm really kind of focused on opening, a spa or fitness. Well, it could be a year and a half until you're open. I've had candidates that, signed up to do like Botox spas and, some of these like testosterone hormone treatment spas. And, like it took them a year and a half to, to be able to they're open. So, so sometimes people don't know where they're at, they don't know how far they are out. They think that, hey, I want to open up a Krispy Kreme or something. And like, well, that's years away,
Sure. Yeah.
And so, but timing is important. And so like, a lot of people that I do talk to, they are in some type of career transition, where they're looking to leave their current job and they have to replace this $200,000 or $250,000 a year income, and that's really hard, like it's hard to make that transition, and it takes long hours if that's something that you have to do, because you can't just say, hey, I'm out work, and not be able to feed your kids and your family,
sure,
and then wait a year to open up a spa, so sometimes that's where some of these like more these service brands, these commercial or home servicing brands come into play for people, is that it offers them the opportunity to get up and going quickly for lower costs and higher margins. Typically the retail space doesn't offer as higher margins as some of the home and commercial services do. So, it is candidate specific, but it's kind of, you get a wide array of people who, I had a guy, leave his job this week, 7 kids. He owned his own HVAC company, but he also worked full time at GE, and then left and opened up a painting company, this week.
Sure.
So it's all walks of life.
Yeah, absolutely. Last question for you, Charles. So, in this economy environment, everyone's nervous and scared, and interest rates are going crazy. With people looking to get into the franchise space, are you seeing the climate for access to capital and lending and things like that becoming more complicated? Or if someone's interested now, can they still go out and get a loan for a franchise? And do you feel like it's easier to get a loan for a franchise versus just a traditional business right now?
Yeah, so we work with a couple funding partners that typically don't have a hard time identifying banks that will lend to a specific brand. Sure. So they typically, you may be familiar with companies like Fran Fund or Benetrends, but they typically work with hundreds of banks that are looking to lend money. And the people who are looking to lend money need to make money also, so they're kind of sitting there twiddling their thumbs as well. I don't, franchising in general over time has had more of a success rate as far as these types of loans go, and so banks feel more comfortable. They get SBA registered. They are backed a certain percentage by the government. So a lot of these banks do this SBA lending. Interest rates, are always, for the most part, variable. Sometimes you can get lucky and get a fixed SBA rate. So some of those people who got in whenever interest rates were really low are dealing with interest rates now that are really high.
Sure.
But yeah, I don't think it's more difficult at this time. It always comes down to, are you making money? Do you have a good credit score? And what's your debt to income ratio? They're going to ask you those questions every time. So
yeah. Absolutely. Well, cool. Well, Charles, we're over time here, man. I apologize, but thanks so much for jumping on with us. We really appreciate it. It's really cool to hear your journey, and you mentioned early on you don't have like this unicorn story, or it's kind of this cool thing, but it's also cool for all of us to hear like, hey, maybe 15 years ago I wasn't even thinking about owning a business, and now I've you've started and sold a ton of businesses, right? So I mean that's a really, really cool thing to think about. What we'd ask you to do to wrap up is give us your 60-second or however long elevator pitch, and we appreciate your time. And anyone who's taken the time to listen to Charles' story today, we really appreciate you and hope you join us on the next episode. So, Charles, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Thanks again, Calvin, for having me on. I appreciate it. This is a good conversation. Yeah, really no elevator pitch from me. And just even to kind of capitalize on my story is, you don't have to wait for that aha moment to become a business owner. Like some people think that you need this fairy tale story, and
Sure.
you don't. And franchising or opening your own business, whatever route it is that your audience decides that they want to take, do it. Because it does offer you freedom. It does offer you flexibility, and you can get your time back. And I'm a walking example of that, and I believe that you are too. And there's a lot of success stories. It does take hard work, and I'll be the first person to tell you that. And the guy who bought the painting business that I referenced earlier, he had a great one-liner. He was like, I actually think it's more risky to have a job than it is to own your own business. And he's so true, because at any moment they can call you and tell you that you don't have income anymore. So, take the leap, and, call a friend or talk to somebody who's done it before. And talk to people who you trust around you. So, but yeah, man, I appreciate it, Calvin. Thanks for having me on. Hopefully you can return the favor.
Yeah, absolutely. Charles, the last thing, how can people get a hold of you? Where's the best place to contact you if they're interested to working with you?
Yeah. So my website, franchisefriend.net. I'm also Charles at franchisefriend.net. So you can reach me there. And I'm also on LinkedIn, so feel free to send me a message on there. So
awesome. Charles, thanks again, man.
Yeah, thanks, man.